The blistering August sun beat down on Xana Montgomery's shoulders. She trudged the final mile toward Willow Creek, her boots worn clean through at the soles. Her once fine dress was now nothing more than a tattered, dusty rag. Everything she owned in the world was bundled in a small cloth sack. The year was 1878. Xana was 22 years old, and she had never imagined she would find herself here, alone, desperate, and so far from everything she had ever known. Willow Creek appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a single dusty street lined with wooden skeletons shimmering in the heat. She was weak from 3 days with barely any food or water, but the sight of civilization sparked something inside her. Hope, or maybe just the raw will to survive. Her father was dead. The family farm in Tennessee had been seized by creditors. She had nothing left but a dream of starting over. As she entered the town, she felt the weight of every stare. Her chestnut hair had fallen from its pins. Her face was smudged with dirt. She knew what they saw, another piece of driftwood washed up on the shores of their hard-scrabbled town. Still, she held her chin high. She walked into the general store. The bell above the door announced her arrival. An elderly man with spectacles looked up from behind the counter. "Excuse me, sir," Xana said, her voice cracking from thirst. "I was wondering if you might be hiring help." The storekeeper eyed her with a mix of pity and suspicion. "Ain't hiring, miss. Times are tight." "Please," Xana swallowed hard. "I can clean, keep books, tend to customers. I'm a hard worker. Like I said, ain't hiring." His tone softened just a fraction. "Try the saloon. They sometimes need girls." The thought made Xana's stomach turn. She nodded politely and stepped back out into the blinding sun. Door after door, the answer was the same. No work. Nothing. By late afternoon, desperation was a cold knot in her gut. Her hands trembled as she approached the last building at the edge of town, the smithy. The rhythmic clang of a hammer on steel echoed from the open-air structure. A tall man worked at the forge, his back to her. He was broad-shouldered and strong, his dark hair damp with sweat. "Excuse me?" she called, her voice barely a whisper over the hammering. He didn't hear her. She took a step closer, her feet unsteady. "Sir, please!" He turned then, sudden and powerful, hammer raised mid-strike. Xana startled backward, losing her balance. The world tilted. Darkness rushed in at the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw was the blacksmith dropping his tools and lunging toward her. When Xana opened her eyes, she was lying on a narrow cot in a back room. A cool cloth was on her forehead. "You're awake," a deep voice observed. The blacksmith was sitting on a stool nearby. He was younger than she'd thought, maybe 30, with a strong jaw and eyes the color of a forest floor. They were filled with concern. "I'm sorry," she began, trying to sit up. "Easy now," he cautioned, handing her a cup of water. "Drink this first." "I'm Elias Wade," he said, "town blacksmith." "Xana Montgomery," she replied. "I apologize for the trouble. I haven't eaten in some time." "No need to explain," Elias interrupted. He waited until she finished the water. "Where exactly are you going?" The truth was, she had nowhere to go. "I'll find something," she said, with a confidence she didn't feel. Elias's expression turned skeptical. "You've tried every place already." "Not the saloon," she admitted, her cheeks flushing. He nodded, understanding her reluctance. Then he stood abruptly. "Wait here." He returned a few minutes later with a small bundle, bread, cheese, and dried meat. "Eat," he said. "Then we can talk." She ate while he watched her from across the room. The silence wasn't awkward. It was watchful. "I need someone," he said finally, breaking the quiet. "To help around the place. Cooking, cleaning. I live above the smithy. There's a small room. It could be yours, if you want the job." Hope, sharp and painful, bloomed in Xana's chest, but it was quickly followed by suspicion. She'd heard stories. As if reading her mind, Elias added, "You'd have your own quarters. Lock on the door. I'm offering honest work, Miss Montgomery. Nothing more." Her hands shook as she considered his offer, her only offer. "I would be most grateful," she managed to say. "You don't need to beg, Zana," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You need a home, and I need help. It's a fair exchange." The sincerity in his voice made her eyes sting. She blinked back the tears. "When would you like me to start?" A small smile touched his mouth. "How about now?" For the first time in months, Zana felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Yes," she said, "I'd like that very much." The living quarters above the smithy were modest but clean, clear evidence of a bachelor's residence. Zana's room was small, but it had a sturdy door with a lock and a window overlooking the creek. It was perfect. That first night, after a simple meal, Elias handed her a small pouch of coins. Her first week's wages, paid in advance. The generosity was unsettling. This man didn't know her at all. Why was he being so kind? As she lay in bed, she made a silent promise. She would work harder than he could possibly expect. She would prove her worth. She had no idea that her worth was the one thing Elias Wade already understood perfectly, and it had nothing to do with cooking or cleaning. The next few weeks fell into a quiet routine. Zana brought order to Elias's chaotic home, and slowly she became a familiar face in Willow Creek. She learned more about her mysterious employer from Mrs. Jenkins, the town laundress. "Been telling him for years he needs help," the older woman declared. "Been that way since he lost his wife." Zana's hands stilled on the linen she was folding. "His wife?" "Emma was her name," Mrs. Jenkins said, her voice dropping. "Pretty little thing from back east. Weren't married but a year when the influenza took her. 4 years ago now. He works too hard, keeps to himself. A man shouldn't be alone like that." The revelation cast Elias in a new light. His quietness wasn't aloofness. It was a fortress built around a deep and private grief. Zana found herself watching him more closely, noticing the shadow that would sometimes cross his face when he thought no one was looking. He was a man haunted by a ghost, and Zana knew all about ghosts. One evening, reviewing his ledger books, Zana noticed he was paying her far more than the going rate. "You're worth every penny, Zana," he said when she confronted him. The warmth in his eyes sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. A few days later, he came home late from a delivery. She had been pacing, sick with a worry she couldn't explain. "I was worried," she admitted, her anger deflating the moment she saw him. "It's nice having someone care if I come home or not," he said, and the simple statement hung in the air between them. Something was changing. The lines between employer and employee were blurring. A fragile, unspoken connection was growing in the quiet spaces of their shared home. And then, at the annual Harvest Festival, everything changed. Elias asked her to dance. As he led her onto the makeshift dance floor, his hand warm and solid at her waist, Zana felt a jolt of awareness course through her. They moved together, surrounded by lantern light and music. It was easy to forget the circumstances that had brought them together. "I'm glad you came to Willow Creek, Zana," he said, his voice low, "even though I fainted in your smithy." His lips curved into a rare smile. "Especially because of that. Otherwise, I might never have gotten up the nerve to speak to you." The admission stunned her. But before she could respond, a commotion at the edge of the square stopped the music. 5 men on horseback had ridden into town. They wore bandanas over their faces. Their pistols were holstered low on their hips. The festive air evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp fear. Frank Dawson and his gang. Dawson's cold eyes scanned the crowd and landed on Zana. He urged his horse forward. "Well now," he said, his voice a gravelly sneer. "Aren't you a pretty one?" Elias stepped in front of her, his body a shield. "She's my wife," he said, the lie spoken with cold, hard certainty. Dawson's eyes narrowed. "Lucky man," he said. He turned his attention to Elias. "I've heard of you, the blacksmith, a man with a very secure safe." The threat was unmistakable. "My men and I will be staying in town tonight," Dawson announced. "We'll be on our way in the morning." No one believed him. The night was a nightmare. A crash from the main room jolted Zana from an uneasy sleep. She grabbed the revolver Elias had given her and crept into the hallway. Elias was on his knees, a bearded outlaw standing over him with a pistol. "Step away from him," Zana commanded, her voice surprisingly steady. The outlaw spun toward her. "Well, look who's awake! The little wife!" "Zana, go back!" Elias yelled, but was silenced by a kick to his ribs. "Last chance," Zana said, cocking the hammer. The man lunged. She fired. The bullet hit his shoulder, but he kept coming. Elias surged to his feet, tackling him. They crashed to the floor. Zana grabbed a cast-iron skillet and swung with all her might. The man collapsed. "Are you hurt?" Elias gasped, climbing to his feet. "No, you're bleeding." Before they could even catch their breath, a voice called from the street. "Jenkins, what's taking so long?" "Dawson." Elias peered through the window. "Dawson and 3 others. They're coming this way." They were trapped. A pounding at the front door echoed through the apartment. "Wade, open up. I want my man back." They tried to escape out the back, but another of Dawson's men was waiting, a shotgun aimed at Elias's chest. They were marched back upstairs. Dawson was waiting, his face a mask of cold amusement. "I came to Willow Creek for a specific purpose," Dawson said. "And you're going to help me?" "We don't have anything worth stealing," Elias stated. "Oh, I disagree," Dawson replied. "I have information. A certain strongbox is passing through town tomorrow, the railroad payroll, and it's being entrusted to you, blacksmith, for safekeeping." Elias's face went blank. "You've been misinformed." "Have I?" Dawson stood, moving to stand directly in front of Elias. He was so close they were almost touching. "Are you willing to bet your wife's life on that?" Zana felt cold fear slide down her spine. "Leave her out of this," Elias said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'd be happy to," Dawson replied smoothly. "Just open your safe when the payroll arrives. Or," he continued, "I can have my men entertain themselves with your lovely wife while we wait. Your choice." Zana saw the moment Elias broke. "Yes," he admitted, his voice a strangled whisper. "The payroll is coming." Dawson smiled. The hours until dawn were an eternity. Zana and Elias sat bound, back to back, on the floor. As the morning light crept through the windows, the sound of an approaching stagecoach echoed from the street. "Showtime," Dawson said. He cut Elias's bonds, then grabbed Zana, holding a knife to her throat. "Remember what's at stake." Elias returned minutes later carrying a heavy iron box. "Open the safe," Dawson commanded. Elias did. The box was too large to fit inside. "Open the box," Dawson ordered. "I can't," Elias insisted. "The railroad agent has the only key." Frustration flashed across Dawson's face. "Miller, get the tools from downstairs. We'll break it open." Just then, a man watching from the street yelled up. "Riders coming! 3 of them!" Dawson cursed. Then, without warning, gunshots erupted from downstairs. "We're surrounded!" Another outlaw shouted from the back. A voice called up from below. "Dawson, we know you're in there. Release your hostages and surrender." Dawson dragged Zana toward the back stairs, using her as a shield. "Tell them to back off or I'll cut her throat." Elias stepped forward, hands raised. "Let her go, Dawson. She's not part of this." "She became part of this the moment you lied about her being your wife," Dawson hissed. "I know who she is, just some drifter you took in. No one would miss her." The words hit Zana like a slap. Was that how the world saw her? But then Elias spoke, his voice quiet, yet filled with a raw emotion that stunned the room into silence. "I would miss her," he said, "more than you could possibly understand." The sincerity in his voice momentarily disarmed Dawson. His knife hand slackened just a fraction of an inch. It was all the opening Zana needed. She drove her elbow hard into his ribs. He grunted, his grip loosening. She wrenched herself free, stumbling toward Elias. The room exploded into chaos. The front door crashed open. Men poured into the apartment, not lawmen, townspeople, armed and furious. Dawson, seeing his plan unraveling, made a desperate lunge for the strong box. A single shot rang out. He fell, a red stain spreading across his chest. In the aftermath, after the outlaws were dead or captured, Elias pulled Zana into her room, away from the violence. He untied her hands, his fingers gentle. "I'm so sorry, Zana," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "When he said no one would miss you, I heard," she said softly. "That's not true," Elias said, his eyes searching hers. "I would. I do. Even when you're just in the next room." The confession hung between them. It was a bridge built in the middle of a battlefield. A few weeks later, Elias took her for a ride. They stopped at a beautiful clearing by the creek. "Zana," he began, his voice nervous. "When Dawson had that knife to your throat, I realized something. I think I started falling in love with you the day you fainted in my smithy." Tears filled Zana's eyes. "Elias." "I know I'm not offering much," he continued, rushing the words out. "A simple life. A past that still haunts me. But if you could consider—" "Yes," Zana interrupted, laughing through her tears. "Whatever you're about to ask, the answer is yes." "But I haven't asked anything yet," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I love you too, Elias," she said, taking his hands. "I think I have from the very beginning." "In that case," he said, his green eyes shining. "Zana Montgomery, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? For real this time?" "Yes," she whispered. "I would like nothing better." Their wedding took place in December, with the entire town in attendance. As Zana stood beside Elias, she reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her here. The desperate woman who had arrived in Willow Creek was gone. In her place stood a woman who had found her home, not in a place, but in the heart of the quiet blacksmith who had seen her, truly seen her, from the very beginning. They built a life, a home, a family. They had 3 children, Emma, Jacob, and Sarah. The smithy prospered. Zana opened her own dressmaking shop. The years passed, filled with the simple, profound joys of a life built on love and mutual respect. On their 10th anniversary, Elias gave her a gold locket. Inside were portraits of him and their children. "Home isn't a place, Elias," she told him, her head resting against his chest. "It's you. It's always been you." From desperate beginnings had come an abundance of love. Her hands, once trembling with hunger, were now steady, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Every hard step of her journey had been worthwhile, because it had led her here, to him. If you enjoyed this story of a love forged in the fires of the frontier, we'd be so grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support is what allows us to keep bringing these incredible tales of courage and unexpected love to life. And we've got another story queued up for you right on the screen. Thanks for watching.